Okay, welcome back. You should have just listened to the Earl King. Let me tell you a little bit more about Schubert before we move on. Schubert himself, he wrote this when he was only 18, and it was very well received, very well known. But he had a hard time finding a publisher for his future works. Um, he wrote over 600 German Lied during his very short lifetime, but he had a hard time finding a publisher, and he never really made much money at it. Um, he ended up selling his music for a lot less than it was actually worth many times. Um, Towards the latter parts of his life, he struggled. He had syphilis, and he actually died at the age of 31. His dying wish was to be buried near Beethoven, and so he was, and so he was buried very near Beethoven. Um, his in, his music includes the 600 German Lied. He also wrote 9 symphonies, um, including the unfinished, which he was, not was not finished at his death. He wrote some chamber music, including quintets, string quartets, piano trios, some piano sonatas, some masses. So he did write some sacred music, and he wrote some other choral music. He wrote operas and just incidental music too, music that was used for different program type events and music that would have been played in you know symphony halls or whatever. But the Earl King is his most famous. So that is all about Schubert. We will continue now talking about the next composer that we're discussing, and his name is Robert Schumann. Now, Schumann started out as a pianist. He was wanting to be a concert pianist, and he had studied concert piano under Professor Weick. Um, he was German born. He studied law at the University of Leipzig, but he always wanted to be a pianist. And so he began studying under Frederick Weick. Um, he somehow injured his right hand. I'm not sure exactly how it occurred, but it ruined his dreams of being a concert pianist. So he began to compose then. Now, when he began studying under Professor Weick, the professor had a young daughter who was I think she was 11 years younger. I believe that's correct. Younger than Robert, and her name was Clara. And Robert fell in love with Clara, and Clara with Robert. But her father would not allow them to date until she was an adult. Really, he when she was 21, he allowed them to marry. Robert was about 30 at the time, so I think there was 9 or 10 years difference in their age. So, but he had loved her since she was just really a child. Um, so they did marry after when her father gave her permission at the age of 21. By this time, Robert was no longer planning to be a concert pianist because he'd injured his hand. So now he had turned to composing. He would write the music, and Clara, because she was a very good pianist herself, she would perform, and several times she performed his music in concerts and throughout, all over Europe. Now, they had 8 children, but Robert developed paranoid schizophrenia, and he was very depressed, and he ended up trying to commit suicide. And so she had to have him committed to an insane asylum, and he lived out the last years of his life there. And so Clara then had to be the breadwinner and take care of all the children. And so she did begin, she really was, doing a lot more concerts across the country, across the world then. But she was very well known as a concert pianist, but not so much as a composer herself. She really played his works. He composed over 200 German Lied, um, several in what were called song cycles, which would be a group of songs that all had a theme running through them. Um, he also wrote chamber music. He wrote 4 symphonies, a piano concerto, uh, amongst his chamber music, he had string quartets, piano trios, piano quintet, and a piano quartet. So, music for several pianos, and a lot of piano sonatas and then other things. He also wrote one opera and some choral music. So he was pretty prolific. He I, he only lived to be 46, so he was born in 1810, died in 1856. So he didn't live a long time, um, but he did live out the last of his years in the insane asylum. He had succumbed to dementia and he was psychotic, um, and all of this was a result of syphilis. So lots of problems with these people and their lifestyles and stuff. All right, the music that we're going to listen to by Schumann is one of his part of a song cycle. The first song in the cycle is called "In the Lovely Month of May." It is strophic. It has two verses. Um, it talks about the fragility of new love, and we're kind of left at the end wondering what's going to happen because there's more story to be told. So he has text painting, which is very similar to word painting, at the end of the first verse as the melody rises up to a climax on "Did Love Rise Up?" The piano moves up, the vocal line moves up, so it kind of leaves you hanging, wondering what's going to come next. So at this point, you should listen to Schumann's "In the Lovely Month of May."